For our last interactive brokerage example, please open the Alpaca Positions and Orders notebook in our course content folder. Alright, inside of this, before we jump forward, I do want to also recommend, as in each of the past sections, that you reference the documentation of Alpaca. Get familiar with it, understand how we're utilizing it in correlation with these calls so that you can be more familiar if you need to go do this out on your own with other types of brokerages and accounts. But again, as we've shown you in these past modules, and I'll try to not sound like a broken record here, there's a great bit of documentation that shows you each of the values that you get back for these calls, what you can pass it. So with this call as compared to some of the others, we are going to ask for additional information. So positions, no, but on orders we're going to ask for different types of orders. We're going to tell it we don't want nested so that we can make it a little simpler to digest. So we are going to add a little bit of flavor to the call we make for the orders section. So here in the orders documentation, and these are the parameters that you can specifically tell it. So we're passing it the status, nested, limit, and direction, which you can see status, limit, nested, and direction all here, and there's additional items that you can pass it for these calls. So again, familiarize yourself with this, understand what you can get, what you can't get, play with it. If you want to try to learn a little more, please reference the documentation. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. So as usual, we're going to import our Alpaca Trade API's Trade API to access each of the functions within this module. Import pandas so that we can utilize it to, in this function, in this notebook rather, not just read our credentials, which we are utilizing it for, but also creating data frames. We are going to now move down a little bit, and this call should feel familiar at this point, where we assign API as our login information for our API secret key, paper account, and v2 of the Alpaca API. And then coming down a little bit here, we're going to create our definition where we want to grab our orders and our positions. So you can do this in multiple defs if you'd like. I chose to put this into one. Feel free to break it out if it's something you want to only call and update your portfolios and orders separately. You do have that capability. You can pull these out and work with them how you see fit. For this example, we're going to create our get Alpaca tables function, and we are going to get orders by calling our API. So our API where we've logged in .list orders function, and we're going to pass it these values so that we can get back a list of all open orders. And I'm actually going to place an order for us here so that we can all see that live. Market's closed, but I'm going to go ahead and place an order for, let's make it something that isn't common with our portfolio, for DraftKings, and I want an order of 100 shares. Confirm. So now we have a market order here open to buy 100 shares of DraftKings. So we'll come back to that. But in our orders, we're going to list all orders that meet this criteria. For positions, we're assigning positions to our API, so our API.list positions, and this is going to give us the default items coming back when we call that list positions value. Here, it's going to be a little confusing at first, but I'll explain to you what's going on and why we're doing what we're doing, and we're doing it this way, trying to set ourselves up for the future when it comes to our Dash applications and how we manipulate the values. But we're doing two things. First, we're going to look at our positions, and if positions is empty is what we're checking here. We're checking if positions is empty. I'm going to create a data frame that's giving it basically a dictionary structure so that I can set it up to be the same exact output as if I called the data frame itself. So if the data frame were to come back filled, a symbol, quantity, current price, average entry price, unrealized P&L, cost basis, side, and asset ID would all be present. So I'm simply going to create a blank positions table that has nothing in it if I were to have no positions. And again, this isn't important for this step. I just want you to understand what's going on because this will become important later for our Dash app. So when we want to visualize this and we have tables that we need to update, we want there to always be something, even if the table is blank. So I'm gonna call this here, create this table, and make sure that it has something even if positions happen to be empty, right? So if you're checking this after hours and you didn't have any positions opened, even for your paper account, right? I've got two that we'll have for our live example, but if this was empty, we wouldn't want there being nothing there for our Dash application later. So if it's empty, create this blank template so that we have something to display there. Else, I want you to take the information inside of positions and I want to pass it to a data frame. So this you can actually learn from the Alpaca documentation, but for each position inside of this positions item, we want to create a data frame. So this is going to grab each of our returns back, and it's going to allow us to put that into the data frame. And it can get pretty ugly if you're going to go ahead and pull positions, which I can show you what those look like. We'll print orders, and we'll print our positions when we run this, so you can see how dirty it is ahead of time before we clean it up and add it to these data frames. But what's going to happen is we're going to for each position, so for each item inside of positions, I want to put these into a data frame. And then here, this table, this position table call, is just me defining which items I want out of that data frame. So I'm just cleaning up the data frame, putting it in order I want, and saying, I only want these items to display. There's going to be a couple more that come over with each position, but these are the only ones I care about. Same thing in orders. So orders, I'm going to, if orders is empty, I'm checking to see if it's empty. If it's empty, create a blank data frame, and I want to have a table that will contain these NAs or contain a blank line of NAs, so that I can have something similar for our Dash table updates later down the road. So again, not important now, but will become important, and you'll see what that looks like later. If it is not empty, it's going to do the same thing as what we did in our positions. For each order line item inside of orders, create a data frame line for it, and here I'm actually going to filter out orders for filled or canceled. So if items are filled or canceled, we are going to be removing them from our data frame. So if they're not equal, sorry, I apologize, I was saying equals, but if they're not equal, so this exclamation point equals is not equal to filled and not equal to cancel, we're doing a filter to this data frame to remove each of those line items. Here we're going to be resetting the index, and I'll show you what that looks like again when we do that print orders, and then what that output looks like. But we're going to be now coming down here and assigning finally our orders table to a cleaned up version of our orders DF, so only giving me these values in this order. And then our function is going to return this orders table or this orders table, depending on if it's empty or not, and it's going to return this positions table, this value or this value, depending on if positions is empty or not. So down here we're going to call get alpaca table, and we're going to assign orders table and positions table to the outputs being returned by this function. Let's go ahead and run it. Okay, so before we go down and run the cleaned up versions of this, you will see that we put in these two print items, so print orders and print positions, and you'll see what actually gets returned from Alpaca before we do any of this cleaning and filtering. So for our orders, you actually get a return that will separate by each order what all of these values are for that specific order. So if I had submitted an order, you get an asset ID, you get when it was created, you get who placed it, you get the stop price, you get when it was submitted, the symbol. So there is a lot of information that comes back for each of these orders that is, just kind of mind-boggling. So you can see why we would want to clean this up and clean up these tables. So we'll see if we can get down here through all the orders, and let's see what it looks like when we get to the positions. So we might have missed the positions field at some point here, but here we go. So I only have the two open positions. So you will, if you sort through this, you'll see one's GM and one's Apple, but you get back a position for each of the ones that are currently open in my portfolio. So GM and Apple are the two I have open, and you will get position 1 here of my GM and position 2 here of Apple, and all of these values. But we only care about certain things, and we want this in a format that we can actually read it and start displaying it. So that's why, and I'm going to go ahead and delete these items out. When we run this, we want to clean this information, put it into this usable format. So we want to get it into a data frame. We want to take out things that are either already filled or canceled, because we don't care about those. We only want to see the open ones. We want to, in the position side, we want to see all open positions, so that when we do this massaging, you get something that looks like this instead of all of that gunk that came through with that. So you can see GM and Apple are two current positions. So you can see the current price that's coming along for the security. You can see what our entry price was for the security, what it has done to our P&L. So our unrealized P&L, we have an unrealized gain of $30 for our GM purchases, and we have an unrealized loss of $1.62 for our Apple purchases. So our cost basis, this is how much money we have into our 11 stocks. Same here, how much money we have into our 10 for GM. We are long in both positions, and we have an asset ID which will be utilized later to reference for canceling, closing, selling these orders. Same in the orders table. You saw me live post a DraftKings order requesting 100 shares at a market order, and you can see that there is one open order for DraftKings that was created on today's date at this unique time, and I think this is again UTC, so don't get alarmed if the time looks wrong. It's a market type, 100 quantity, side is buy, status is new, so it has not yet been filled, and here's the ID for that order. So if we ever want to close that order and it's not yet been filled, we can do that later utilizing this ID. So again, before we jump out of this here and we wrap up, just try to go through here and figure out what we did with this information. So the calls, I think you can probably get at this point, are pretty easy. They're pretty straightforward. I think those are going to come naturally, but the parts that aren't are here, where we clean up the information. We put it into this format so that you can see what's in your position, what's in your orders, the pertinent information. So again, we further clean up here. Instead of getting all of those pieces, when you saw when we had printed these out, all of those pieces of information, there was 50 different pieces or items that come across for each. I really only care about these when I'm trading. I want to know what it is, what my cost basis is, how much money I've lost, what the ID is in case I want to do anything with it. So I will often clean these up so that I get good information to display and interactability later when I go to put these into my Dash applications. So again, just take your time figuring out the call, but then how to clean this up, get it into a usable format, and if you want to do that with Robinhood information, other things, figure out what that call is coming back, because this may differ. When you go into here, this call is probably not going to be the same to get it into that data frame. It may already come back in a data frame, or it may come back as a dictionary. It may come back with certain characters that you have to remove before and after to be able to get it into this format. So just pay special attention, figure out how you can get it into these usable formats, and practice. Place your trades in here, get some things in your portfolio, get some things in your order history, see how they come across, and then just play with it. Figure out your calls for your orders, your positions, and make sure you're comfortable before going on to the next section, because we are in our next section actually going to start displaying some information in our Dash application. So we're going to build up, we're going to learn some basics of Dash applications in that review, but we are going to be passing it some of these items so that we can visualize and actually see what's coming across, and then we'll kind of tie it all together so that we can see what that looks like and start trading live with it. But it's important to understand the basics of this section and how we're going to utilize this information, clean it up, get it into formats we need for our display. So with that, please again go back, rehash, figure out the things you need to figure out, email me with questions, and if there's nothing else, feel free to jump forward if you're comfortable into how we're starting to visualize this information into Dash displays.